This week in the enterprise security news, Beyond Security partners with Vicarius, Amazon's Parler removal and what it could mean for the confidence in the cloud, Count sold to Equifax, McAfee versus CrowdStrike, JumpCloud raises some funds, Red Hat acquires StackRox, and SolarWinds warnings of weak security, and more. In the second segment, we talk about asset management in the cloud. This year is a big year for cloud, and we need to get a better handle on discovering and managing assets. How can we do that? In the final segment, Chris Blask from Unisys will join us for an interview along with Josh Marpet. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. As your attack surface stretches from the data center to the cloud and the device edge, security teams need visibility across it all to confidently detect and respond to threats. Experience frictionless hybrid security that helps you stop breaches 84% faster with ExtraHop's Reveal X360, the first and only SaaS-delivered network detection and response. Explore the interactive demo at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Face it, your data is everywhere. No matter where your data lives or what tools you use, Imperva Data Security unifies compliance, security, and privacy needs for any data store while saving you time and money. Imperva finds threats before they become a compliance or security incident, and built-in automation empowers you to remediate quickly. Give your business confidence about what is happening with your data, where it's stored, and who's accessing it. For a 30-day free trial of cloud data security, visit securityweekly.com/Imperva. CyberEye for Teams was built to help organizations stay ahead of today's evolving threat landscape and to meet today's most difficult security challenges. Fortune 500 companies like Amgen, Booz Allen Hamilton, Plexus, CVP, Fannie Mae, and Vizio, small businesses worldwide, and several branches of the U.S. military use CyberEye for Teams to close the skill gaps that put their organizations at risk and to equip their workforce with the skills to defeat their security adversaries. CyberEye for Teams. Problem solved. Visit cybereye.it/solved to solve your training problems. Can we continue to function without facts? Cybercriminals exploit the absence of facts, harming organizations through the easiest point of entry, email. No company should claim they can stop all phishing attacks. It's about having all the facts in seconds and reducing the time it takes to respond. It's minutes versus hours in the difference between a security incident and a breach. Greathorn. See through the dark. To learn more, go to securityweekly.com/Greathorn. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly, episode number 213 for January 13th, 2021. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined remotely by Adrian Sanabria. Adrian, welcome.
Hey, welcome back. Thankfully, nothing happened since last week. There's nothing to talk about. Just a very, very boring day in the world.
Off to a stunning start of 2021. Mr. Tyler Shields is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
Hey, what's going on, my man? News is abundant, obviously.
Yes, abundant news. Mr. John Strand is here with us. John, welcome.
Coming from the basement today. But yeah, I don't know. Just things are so dead since the last time we talked. It's just quiet.
I got announcements. I almost jumped right into the news but without reading announcements because I'm so excited. Do you have a specific guest or topic you want us to cover in one of the shows? Submit your guest suggestions by visiting securityweekly.com/guests. Submit the form. We review those on a monthly, actually now sometimes a bi-monthly basis. So also if you missed Security Weekly Unlocked, the wonderful virtual conference from late last year, you can access all of the content on demand, whether you registered or not. So you can register and watch all that content at securityweekly.com/unlocked. I think I want to start with the Amazon story because it's kind of interesting when we think about, so in Security Weekly's own history, we publish, obviously, as many of our viewers know, we publish our videos to YouTube. We've had issues in the past with YouTube taking down our videos and not telling us why. They just magically start disappearing. And it's not copyright, because copyright violations have a different process. I guess depending on I'm not sure what it depends on, but we've had stuff that's flagged as copyright, and you can quickly remediate that on the YouTube platform. But they've pulled our videos before. They also changed their API.
There was that thing a while ago where they went after hacking videos, right?
Yeah, they've done
that. They've done that multiple times. In fact,
nothing about hacking.
Yeah,
and then they kind of backed off that.
Right, but
one
they
of the
changed
first
the rules.
Batches of hacking videos that they took down were actually Security Weekly videos, and the only reason why we were ever able to take care of it is Paul and I actually know people at Google. And Paul, if I remember correctly, when they first did that, we didn't get a good answer as to why they cut us out.
We never did, because they're like, well, it's a proprietary algorithm, and if we told you how it worked, then we'd have to kill you because people would figure it out and upload stuff to YouTube, which, as we all know, people do anyway. Also, with their API, they change the rules just all the time. For no reason. Your app could be approved or it could not, and it's very bizarre process I've gone through. For that reason, we I built into our software the ability to publish our videos to Amazon S3 because of the kind of uncertainty with YouTube. But now Amazon's come out and pulled Parler off of Amazon, and I'm like, well, that's great. Like, you could host it yourself, but then you're still like, there's still like domain registrars, like DNS, and your ISP that you'd still have to worry about. Like, I guess if people want you off the internet, if they
can find the name of the company, Paul, but there's actually an ISP that's starting to block traffic to YouTube and Twitter for its users out in Idaho because of censorship concerns. So we're now
full circle.
This is a small thing, but it's an ISP that decided, hey, they're censoring, we're going to censor them.
Right. So I guess the question running through my mind when we get on this show and we talk about enterprise security is, how much do you trust your providers? Like, Microsoft and Google obviously could be in that same boat. Like, how much do you trust your providers that they could just decide one day, for whatever reason, that they're going to stop services for whatever reason, right? And we're not just talking about like, I'm using this Amazon service and they've decided to sunset it, which is one thing, also concerning, but like the removal from your business from a platform it's a business risk thing. Maybe not cybersecurity, but certainly business continuity.
Well, we actually had that incident a number of years ago where Google locked BHIS down completely because of an attack. We were pen testing a company, and the company got an alert from Google saying, hey, there's attack traffic coming from your environment. Is this legit? And the CIO of the company said, well, I want to see what's going to happen. And they said, no, we don't know who this is. And we actually had to go to Google with the contract because they shut us down and show them the contract. But they locked down all of BHIS for about a couple hours. And that's significant. And it was nice that, once again, I knew people at Google. But for a lot of other companies, they'll just shut you down and then they won't give you any reason at all for it.
So
what's the fix?
Yeah, what's the answer? Is it backups? Is it redundancy? Do you go across all three? I
think it's just another scenario that you have to have in your BCP plan. Regions of AWS also go down. So it's another thing to worry about, I think. And I think, the arbitrary nature of it is one thing. Like, if it's, Parler, I think it was clear the moment Twitter suspended Trump's account, there was going to be a lot of focus suddenly on Parler, because Facebook followed suit, Instagram, like all of his accounts were shut down everywhere. So the great eyes turned to Parler and they're like, okay, let's pop some popcorn and see what's going to happen here. But Black Hill's getting cut off, and like, you read these stories every now and then where somebody says their Gmail account was just suddenly wiped, and it was how they accessed everything, so it's, even at the individual level, this kind of stuff happens, and it's huge.
On this particular one, though, I think it's pretty clear that it needs to be done, but it's such a gray area. Like, when you start to get into political questions and you start to get into ethical questions and moral questions, where do they draw that line? At what point can they just shut you down randomly based off the fact that you're a hacking newscast? Right. Well, that's obviously, that gray area is my bigger concern on the political sphere versus this particular Parler.
The terms of service aren't written for our protection. They're written for the company's protection and to give them the ultimate flexibility and control so that basically they can shut people down without.
And they can enforce whatever moral or ethical standards of business they want.
Right.
And a huge concern about this is even having the conversation is politically charged, right? Like, Parler was a cesspool. There's no question. It was a dumpster fire. And if we start talking about what happened, it's very hard because there's a lot of people that say it's censorship and they scream about it. And you have a lot of people that say, well, it's good that it happened to those conservatives. It's like, because it's politically charged, it's killing the conversation, and it's a conversation that we need to have.
Yeah, Cloudflare had similar issues, where they were protecting, white supremacist websites and pro-Nazi websites and stuff like that. And they eventually, I think, cut those folks off, but only after years of pressure to do so. And it's interesting seeing how, like on one side, you have people saying, man, this came way too late. The Twitter suspending accounts and dumping Parler. And then out in Europe, like Angela Merkel, and a lot of folks in Europe who have, kind of different sensibilities around privacy and protection of this kind of stuff, we're heavily against it, and shocked by, the fact that AWS would just pull the rug out from under them.
I think that there's the biggest problem is that there's no governmental direction and clarity on it, right? The government's not saying X is acceptable or Y is acceptable. And without clarity and without a direction, it's impossible for companies in that seat of power to make decisions that will make everyone happy.
Yeah.
Well, and it also gets into a question of, is this a utility, and should it be treated as a utility? And these are things we've got to work out, and soon.
Yeah, agreed. And I think there are some efforts to provide clarity. Those are going to take time. I mean, this is not, should every major company have to be the content police? To a certain extent, there is clarity. When content breaks the law, such as child pornography, perfectly clear. Like there's no gray area there, right?
Such as inciting a riot.
Yeah, now is that I think that's more of a gray area than maybe child pornography, right? But there are laws, but then beyond those laws, which are again also up to interpretation to a certain extent. Now you've got to police other content that isn't directly tied to law here in the U.S. And it's up to the providers to really do that and make their decisions. And I don't think that the big five tech and even outside of that, they want to be in the content policing business. Google has to hate that, right? They have to hate policing that content, right? It's just a huge thorn in their side.
It's not winnable, right?
Yeah.
There's a great show that's out on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, which I think is interesting. They're talking about manipulation by Facebook and Google and all these different things, and yet it's Netflix. But it's a great movie, and I think people should go watch it to at least kind of frame the problem a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, and there's also the credit card companies too, which is interesting. And I've also been a victim of this because we have a cigar podcast, right? So we're not in the tobacco. I don't sell cigars. We do a cigar podcast, and if we wanted to accept money for anything, doesn't matter. Our business has to do with cigars. So you know what? We go to a website hosting Squarespace, and they're like, you can't use our payment processor because your business is in cigars.
Yep.
And like, what? I can't advertise on Facebook for the cigar podcast because they're like, no, violates our standards of tobacco. So that's outside the law because I'm operating within the confines of the law. We don't sell tobacco. Even if we want to give away free samples, they have to validate their age in the city and town and county that they're in. So we're following all the rules, but still we're limited.
So if you all remember, one of the very first breaches that really hit the media in a big way, and it was one of the first companies that was effectively killed by a breach, which is still a very short list, called Card Systems. And I was working for a payment processor back then as well. That's where I cut my teeth in security. And they offered their customers to my company, and we couldn't accept them because they were a higher risk processor, and they were taking like adult payments, tobacco, that kind of stuff.
Pornhub's in that situation right now, right? All the credit card companies pulled out of Pornhub.
Yeah,
speaking of
Pornhub,
I phrased that really bad, really poor phrasing.
Did you see really that whenever Trump was getting banned from Twitter and YouTube and everything, Pornhub released a statement, said that we've also banned Donald Trump from Pornhub.
Good Lord.
So hard.
Well, that just killed their traffic.
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, we'll have to. This segment really needs to be an hour because we just spent half of it talking about that particular issue. I think we could probably still continue, but let's cover some product announcements and partnerships and things like that. Beyond Security has announced a partnership with Vicarius. Vicarius is a sponsor here on Security Weekly, so I was happy to see this partnership because I really like Vicarius product. I've got to know the product team very well, and they're doing a great job. So we can talk about that or move on. It's up to you guys.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about Beyond Security.
Yeah, what does?
So
now I'm getting them confused. Automated penetration testing and vulnerability scanning.
Yeah, not Beyond Trust.
Yes.
No, beyond. So this kind of gets into that area that we need more people to get involved in, where we're doing threat emulation. I don't mind whenever people are talking about threat emulation and threat simulation when they start conflating it and saying, it's a pen test. That's crap. But there's a huge market for having as much automation of post-exploitation activities as possible. And, even though beyond some of their marketing I disagree with, I think this is going to be a huge growth area. And Paul, I've been asking this for a while. Why the hell is Tenable not involved in the adversarial simulation space and automation?
It would be it would be a perfect pivot for them because the other players in the space, Qualys and Rapid7, have made their own pivots, but not in that direction, right? They're more in the log management, SIM, patching, in those types of spaces, web application scanning, even container security, right? And Tenable has not gone in that direction. A direction Tenable could go in, which now that you bring this up, John, it makes perfect sense. They should buy an attack surface management company, and they should buy a breach and attack simulation company. That's where they go in the opposite way your competition's going.
If you look at and if you look at the MITRE attack technique matrix, only 2 of those squares are something that a vulnerability assessment scanning tool can find. Right. The rest of them are all going to be done through adversarial simulation, and Tenable would crush it. And I've had calls with executives at Tenable, and I've told them exactly, hey, this is huge. You need to do this, and they're like, yeah. Instead, we're going to focus on vulnerability prioritization. It's like, God damn it.
Yeah. Already very crowded.
I feel you.
What other stories did you guys want to talk about?
The Red Hat is just, I thought that was interesting because, Kubernetes and everything, it's just, Red Hat acquiring StackRox. Red Hat really is making a play in that whole Kubernetes container part, and they've been doing it for a long time. And I wanted to get your opinion on that, Paul, for like the StackRox thing. It seems like it's a good mix. It really does.
Yeah, StackRox was early on the pivot to help secure Kubernetes and kind of then branded themselves as a leader in helping secure a Kubernetes environment. So kind of not surprising that Red Hat would acquire them, for that technology. Although OpenShift is a different stack, right? Not to confuse words with StackRox, right? But a different alternative to Docker and Kubernetes. Tyler, you're kind of nodding your head. Did I get that right?
Yeah. I mean, OpenShift has its own thing. So that's my thing about Red Hat is they're inside of IBM. B, they're Red Hat. They're big. They're slow. OpenShift is not necessarily the dominant player in that space. So I think the acquisition that they made is great. I think it adds security controls to one of the leading players in the stack in that race. But even Kubernetes as a kind of generic term and a generic way of delivering, you can deliver on Google's version of Kubernetes right inside of their stack. Same thing with Amazon. Same thing with OpenShift. Well, the idea is that OpenShift or Pivotal, those guys provide a abstraction layer on top of the infrastructure provider. So it's going to be interesting to see who ends up owning that security control, whether it's the abstraction layer, whether it's the infrastructure provider that's coming up from the bottoms up. The dynamics there are still in flux. I think the interesting thing about StackRox is they've been around for a while. I think they got beat up pretty good by Aqua and Twistlock.
They did
early on in their lives. And they just never really got to the point where they were dominant. And so I'm pretty sure this acquisition was a little bit of a, hey, let's get out of the game acquisition for the StackRox team. And it's a good place for them to land. And I think it provides additional value to OpenShift. It's just the real question is, where does security live in that stack going forward? And I'm not sure it's at the OpenShift tier. I think it could be more at an infrastructure tier over time.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, the puzzle pieces that fit together for your DevOps toolchain set, right? I think we're not done talking about that for sure.
Not even remotely close. Let's throw in GitHub, GitLab into that equation. You start talking about the definition of the stack, and it is so vague right now.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to point out, in general, looking back at 2020, even with COVID,
we don't do that. We don't do that around here, Adrian.
No.
Nope.
All right, we can move on to that. No, it's in general, we saw more funding than ever. It was a record year in terms of VC funding, PE money, like just the money being invested in startups only went up, so it had, no impact, at least no negative impact that I've seen on investment. And now it's becoming even more common to see, we're almost, I don't know what the average is or where it's moved, but it seems like we're going from, double-digit investments being common to triple-digit $1 million investments being common. In late December, we saw, it's one of the only times I've seen a 9-digit Series A investment. There was a $100 million investment in a cloud security startup called Wiz, and it's just. And the acquisition prices, Expanse going to Palo Alto for $800 million was mind blowing for me. Mm-hmm. It's this stuff is only going up.
Yeah, it's absolutely ludicrous, the valuations and things right now. I was going to bring up Wiz as well. They were on a $500 million valuation. My understanding is that they've been building product for roughly 9 months, have some decent customer acquisition, and got $100 million on an A round, mostly because it was the Adelon team that had popped. Yeah. They basically popped out of Microsoft all as one team and said, hey, we're going to take a shot at this thing. And they just had investors knocking down the door and like, here, have $100 million, take a big shot at it. And, they're not the only ones. Look at Laceworks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Look at Laceworks, $75 million total invested over the last, I don't remember how many years, 6, 8, 10 years that they've been in business. Just took in $525 million investment for their most recent round. Wow. After being total investment of 75. It's like the blitz scale. It's interesting. Like, I feel like the public market valuations being astronomical are now teaching people, hey, if that's the way public market valuations are going to be, let's go ahead and pump the private market valuations to match so that when they go public, they're already in the right sphere.
It's interesting. And JumpCloud just raised $200 million. And I mean, they've got their sights squarely set on Microsoft, which wasn't always the case. But I think you're right, Tyler, because I think the way the market has unfolded kind of led them to that, to be like, you know what? We can probably raise enough money and go after Microsoft, because you know what? A lot of people are like, Active Directory and Azure AD security really sucks. And we spend a lot of money on that. And when we could maybe go to a different provider.
I still think it's absolutely hilarious, though, that people look at Microsoft and Active Directory security and they're like, you know what? We can do that better by starting from scratch. Good luck.
I don't know. I did a briefing with the JumpCloud folks and I was impressed.
Yeah, but they've been around
it's not the shiny stuff that they show you. It's the boring, mundane details in the background and the support. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people that are investing in companies going head to head with Microsoft just don't understand.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous to go against Microsoft in the security space, certainly, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a counterpoint here, though, in the sense that if you can create a business that is disruptive in a way, and it doesn't even have to be a technology disruption, although that's the most common. It could be a go-to-market disruption. It could be a number of different disruption patterns. But I feel like we've gone through enough of an iteration of innovation that even people like Microsoft are susceptible to disruption in certain segments, not on a global scale, but certain segments, because they're 10 years old, 15 years old, and technology has advanced and changed so much. Right, in the 20, 30 years, whatever they've been around, that it should be possible to innovate, disrupt, and take over. Now, the problem is it will take $100 million, $200 million A and B rounds to do it.
But all those technologies that you talk about, right? Every single one of them arcs back into integration with Active Directory, because if you can't integrate with Active Directory or Azure, you're dead in the water. So, I understand the concept of disruption, but if you talk about all this new quote unquote innovation, all of it has to work with existing Active Directory stacks. So possible to disrupt in a completely new way that's outside of the traditional Active Directory, Azure, Office 365 paradigm that organizations are just used to.
So JumpCloud's focus from early on, I don't know where they are now, but I covered them back when they were pretty young, back in 2013, when I first joined 451 Research and started writing about the industry. But they were focused on companies that hadn't chosen yet. They hadn't had a need for Active Directory yet. So they're going after small to mid-size startups, once they get a couple hundred people, hey, instead of miring yourself in Active Directory and having to hire full-time people to babysit it and take care of it, here's an alternative.
Yep. And they have great technology too.
Hey, John, one last point on this I want to ask John. What's your thoughts on AD against using, say, like Google as your, kind of main point of identity over time? Is Google have a chance of disrupting the traditional AD approach?
No, they absolutely do, but they've lost that opportunity. Google doesn't care. If you look at actually having an organization that you have audit and compliance, you have security standards that you have to adhere to, we're actually moving our whole entire company over to Azure because they give us the security visibility into our files. They give us, for DLP, they give us file tracking. They give us all of the security stuff that we need for a number of different types of attacks. And Google, I really get the impression they look at a lot of that stuff that general corporations need for compliance, certification, and accreditation, and they kind of poo-poo it. It's like, yeah, no, we don't care. So it really feels like Google has missed an opportunity because they're not even really trying to cater to existing Active Directory companies. And Microsoft, if you're looking at how easy it is to stand up a company, I mean, it's like less than an hour. You can stand up Active Directory, you can have your email server set up, you can have your DNS stuff pointed, and you can be running your company that quick. And Microsoft is basically moved into the small to medium-sized business space in a big way, and we're seeing all of our customers in that space are predominantly using Microsoft services. So yes, I think Google absolutely could, but I don't think that Google fundamentally understands like the idea of what corporations actually need from a security perspective, and Microsoft does. Now, that doesn't mean that Microsoft doesn't have problems. I mean, you talk about innovation and integration. Microsoft is still having trouble integrating Office 365 with Azure and all the different logs, trying to get that to Sentinel, but they're doing it, right? We're seeing that slow lurching progression, whereas Google like honestly, it looks like they look at everything that corporations do and need to do, and they're like, that's not cool, that's not hip, we're not that interested in it. And they think that just by being the gravity of Google that they're going to pull all these companies in, and that's just not the case.
Have you ever been in a position where you're like, tell a company, maybe it's the company you work for, maybe it's the company you're consulting, that you've got some cybersecurity issues, and then they get breached, and you can have this kind of I told you so moment? I think one of the biggest ones is with the U.S. federal government and the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, which produced reports and was like, hey, there's some security vulnerabilities across the federal government. And then SolarWinds happens, and I think they probably rightfully so have an I told you so moment identified, probably one of the larger ones. They I'm familiar with this program, actually. They studied government cybersecurity practices and issued 3,000 recommendations in the last decade that agencies could implement to make their networks more secure. Of those, nearly 20% haven't been fully addressed, including 75 of the highest priority recommendations.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Because you remember they used to give government scorecards for different agencies. Like you get an A, B, C, D, or F, right? And almost every single government agency got an F, and that's what they were posting publicly. And I was working in the government space, the Department of Interior at that time, and all those scores were very well founded.
Right. Did things get better with CISA, you think, in certain areas?
I agree. I think they have.
Well, until
anyone else?
Krebs was fired anyway. Well, I'm sure they're still doing good work, right? But I think they're missing the leadership position, right? That hasn't been backfilled. It probably won't until the transfer of power happens.
Well, and the biggest reason, one of the biggest things that I love about it is their alerts and notifications have actionable data in it.
Yeah.
Like it's not just, we're seeing these attackers, be careful. It's like, no, we're seeing this attack. Here's the exact techniques. Here's the things that you can write signatures on. Here's the MITRE techniques associated with it. That's actionable intelligence on actual attacks that are coming. And I love it. I think that that's great because you can take those, right? You can take, it's always at the bottom of their alerts, and you can feed that into something like Atomic Red Team and do that simulation in your company. And you can say, look, we were able to detect 80% of what CISA just put out. So no, hats off to them. And also with the election and all the work that they did, I think it's as successful as it could have been.
Agreed.
In the time frame that it's been up and running.
Absolutely agree. Let's see. You talked about JumpCloud. Any other stories
you had a few funny. You had a few funny ones on here, like Kevin Mandia getting a postcard. I
wanted to hit on that one.
Did you see that? It looks like the Russians sent him a postcard. That's not the first time that's happened.
So I read that article and I immediately thought, okay, yeah, did the Russians send him a postcard, or did some crazy ass troll happen to get lucky on timing?
Right.
Right. I mean, there's no true indication.
There was time to send a postcard after it came public, though, right? It wasn't before.
No, this card got there before.
Announced it.
This card, okay. Yeah, it was before announcement of the breach. So I'm just thinking, okay, somebody's trying to be a funny guy, because I mean, it's the Russians. That's been a storyline for how long, right? And maybe just some troll got lucky. I can't imagine it would be anywhere near a Russian playbook to send a "Hey, you've been hacked" postcard. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
No,
but it's awesome if they did, though. That's a crazy cool.
It's super funny.
I mean, if you look at this campaign, it was so careful and precise compared to other stuff that we've seen. Like they actually took away their access to thousands of endpoint or hacked entities or entities they could have hacked. Just to be careful and not to get discovered too soon. So this would be totally. Like it doesn't match the campaign at all, in my opinion.
No, if this really happened, there's some dude in Russia getting the beat down and being chucked into some cold ass cave prison
right now.
I promise you. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think more likely some information about what was about to become public was leaked, and someone was like, "Ooh, really? That's happening? I need to send a postcard." Right? Someone that had left and was
Igor,
wanted to troll. Right?
I do have one that I want to talk about before we leave, and it's an axe to grind, and I get pissy about it. Somebody had put in the show notes the critical controls and doing inventory of hardware and software. I just want to say, whenever we were creating the 20 critical controls, and by the way, James and Kelly Taralla are the main authors of that right now and have been for years. But when we were all working on the 20 critical controls, we made those two the first controls for a goddamn reason. And it's weird because out of all the controls, it seems to be that's the one that people ignore the most. They're like, "Oh, I don't need to inventory my hardware or software. That seems stupid. Let me run a vuln scan." But we put it as the first two because they were literally that important. And the point was, you cannot protect what you don't know that you have. And it's sorry if it's a little bit of a pissy thing on the show.
That's why I put it in there. I have the same axe.
Yep.
And I love to grind.
We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it in the next segment too. We're going to dig into it. It's a good lead in.
Transition.
Yeah.
Well, I won't be here for that segment, but I just wanted to say, as one of the people that was there at the beginning, like we put it there for a goddamn reason. People, go inventory your hardware and your software. I know it's not sexy, but I'm sick and tired of working IR engagements and asking questions like, "What's this IP address?" And they're like, "I don't know.
I don't know.
Are you guys running this in your environment? I don't know." Like, come on. It's level 1. Let's do it. It doesn't have to be that hard. But like I said, I won't be here, I guess, for the next segment, but we did that stuff for a reason.
Outstanding.
Yep. And before we jump off, the other one I thought was funny was and articles from Seeking Alpha, any kind of, and it's not just Seeking Alpha, it's Motley Fool, as security has become big traded business. These articles always crack me up because they don't understand the security industry. And you get articles like, oh, McAfee's like turning towards a platform play now, like CrowdStrike. And you're like, what is, did you read the Wikipedia page on McAfee at all? Like they turned to a platform play in the early 2000s, like long before CrowdStrike ever existed, and you see articles.
I love it.
Like, yeah, I like putting articles in there where I'm like, companies. If you see this article, like don't bother reading it. I think that falls in this category, right?
I love it whenever they talk about security companies on like Kramer or something like that, and he starts talking so seriously, like he knows the company inside and out and backwards, and like, you don't know at all what you're talking about, man. But that's okay, right?
You know what's funny about this article, though, is what I got out of it, yes, is the stupidity of a, Seeking Alpha article. But what I also got out of it is kind of the unification that's occurring in our market in the overall security space. The unification is crazy, and it's very difficult to even understand one product from another now because they're so overlapped.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everything's the same platform. Everything wants to be the broad platform that does everything.
Yeah, like another Seeking Alpha article a couple of years ago, they were like, Cisco's going to buy FireEye. And, my first reaction to that is there's almost 100% product overlap there. Right. And it would be so expensive. That would be the dumbest deal ever. And I don't know. I think sometimes they throw this stuff out there to actually influence the market. And that article did have an effect on FireEye stock when it was published.
Interesting. If only they had a trusted source, Adrian, they could go to for actual coverage of the market and solutions.
We should look into that.
It's like we've tried that, right?
Alrighty, gentlemen, we'll take a short break, come back, and we're going to talk about asset management coming up next. Stay tuned.